Good. So I want to start by reading just the first Bardo verse again. In this room, and I believe next door, you have just heard all 6 verses, the teachings of all 6 root verses of the Bardo next door and here. Nod if you were next door. Yeah, nod. That's good. I just want to, this week, focus on the first one, which is the Bardo of life. So I'll read you that verse again, and then what we'll do is sort of unpack it, try and explore what it's trying to get at. I'll try and leave some time for questions if, well, we'll see how we do for time. But here's the verse again. Oh, now, when the Bardo of life upon me is dawning, abandoning idleness, there being no idleness in a devotee's life, entering into the reality undistractedly, listening, reflecting, and meditating, carrying onto the path knowledge of the true nature of appearances and of mind, may the Trikaya be realized. Once that the human form has been attained, may there be no time or opportunity in which to idle it away. So that's your first verse. And like I did last week, I want to sort of set a little bit of context for this verse particular. And it might recap a little bit on last week. So the assumption is that this life is an in-between state between birth and death and whatever happens after death. If you can believe that, or at least be open to that, even though, we don't know for sure. I don't know what happens at death. I have confidence that death isn't the end, based on some experiences that I've had in meditation, which I can't prove to you are concrete experiences, based on some experiences that I've had of a more psychic nature, communicating with my parents after their death, or having a sense of them after their death. Again, I can't prove to you. That's not scientific proof. It was proof enough for me. And based on some reading that I've done, both from Buddhism. For me, Buddhism, as you practice, I think Akash Mitra next door was saying that it becomes, the more you practice, the more true you realize it is. So it's based on my dharmic experience, and it's based on reading that I've done about near-death experiences and afterlife, not near-death, past life memories that some people have, particularly when they're young, and a more sort of philosophical, Western philosophical explanation. Like last Saturday, we had a philosopher here called Federico Campagna being interviewed by Maitreya Bandhu as part of Poetry East. Watched that online. I thought it was wonderful. And Federico Campagna is not a Buddhist, and he was saying he's just not convinced about death being the end. From a philosophical perspective, I haven't got time to make an argument for that. What I did say last week is that common sense reality is just wrong. And you kind of know that, I know that, and modern science teaches you that. So even if you don't accept that there's something beyond death, if you're a thinking human being, you will accept that we don't know what's going on even now. Even now, in this moment, we don't know what's really going on, what the nature of perception is, what the nature of this world is, what the nature of consciousness is, what the nature of our own bodies are. We don't really know. And even modern science doesn't know. It doesn't know. Scientific materialism is a belief system, not a scientific. It's not got a scientific basis. Anyway, the point is that if this life is an in-between state, I think the question that then arises is, what is this life for? If death isn't the end, and this life is part of a chain of states, then at least for me, I think the question arises, well, what does this segment of the chain mean in the larger context? When you ask what is the meaning of something, you're sort of stepping outside of it and talking about it as if it were from the outside. This perspective of the Bardos asks you to step outside of life, to look back at life and say, what's it for? That's what, in a way, Buddhism is saying. And the conclusion is that this life is for, well, it's for realizing the potential that consciousness has. Maybe that's not how Buddhism would strictly put it. It's me paraphrasing. It's like Buddhism says, look, I have got a potential that is extraordinary just by being conscious and by being human, and that most of the time the tragedy is we don't even realize a fraction of the potential of our minds, and in not realizing that, we live an impoverished life that not only causes ourselves unnecessary grief, but probably we add to the pain around in the world. Yeah? All the man-made, human-made suffering in the world, you take the war in the Middle East or Ukraine or wherever there is human-made suffering, all of that, from a dharmic perspective, is because we do not realize what really is going on, and we haven't realized the potential of the mind. We're like, I don't know, fish in a barrel where the water's running out, scrabbling around, having, I don't know, battling for life, you could say, with each other, and not realizing that there's a way out of that situation. If there wasn't a way out of that situation, in a way, fair enough. You know, you have to make the best of life. The tragedy is that there's a way out. And that way out is to do with the mind. And our culture tells us that happiness, fulfillment, the meaning of life, if you ask that question, our culture tells us it's to become happy. Happiness will come through, I don't know, health and maybe well-being, but mainly through the acquisition of material possessions and maybe some sort of status. You know, if you get all the right, I don't know, material possessions and you've got a reasonably functioning body, then that is seen as happiness. And Buddhism's saying, look, that is, I don't know, that's just a very impoverished vision of what life is for. Even if you don't believe in something beyond death, I think that in your heightened, probably most of us, if you're here, have had some experiences of heightened awareness. Some people probably have them through recreational drugs. And the trouble with recreational drugs, they're illegal. But that's not the only trouble. They're not part of the path. They don't actually lead to transformation. You might have some sort of heightened experience, and then you have a come down, and you have to. I'm talking theoretically here. I've never tried them. You then have to have more and more drugs to try. You get diminishing returns. Do you sort of mean? And you can end up a mess, and you can cause a mess in other people's lives. There might be glimpses, but there's no path of transformation. Bhante Sangharakshita, the founder of this centre and this order and movement that I'm part of, my teacher, says it's like a smash and grab raid on reality. So if you're tempted to find the truth through hallucinogenic means, I think his answer would be grow up. It's like you're grabbing at reality in an infantile way rather than taking responsibility for transforming your life and your mind. So that's not the answer. On the other hand, at least some people who have had those sorts of experiences know that our ordinary everyday perception and ordinary everyday consciousness is not all that there is. In fact, it's not telling us the truth. I would recommend going on retreat. Of course I would. If you come on one of these intensive meditation retreats, I can guarantee that your consciousness will change. You will have an experience of the mind that is different, heightened, more fulfilling, more beautiful, more beautiful but more sort of complete, more true than your everyday life. And if you have those sorts of experiences, most people will want to do something about them because they feel more real. In comparison, most of our life doesn't feel real. Yeah? And somewhere, I think most people intuit that. It cannot be fulfilling to, in a way, live what the media tells us, that sort of life. It's interesting with this philosopher we had, Federico Campagna, on Saturday. He's a sort of metaphysical philosopher. I don't know how he calls himself. Anyway, he was saying that, look, these are my words, paraphrasing him. We're about to have an election in this country, and a lot of people are fed up with politics and disillusioned with it. He was saying, look, politics, you can't get to the real solution for fulfillment and happiness through political means. You have to have a metaphysics underlying that, and then you build the politics on top of the metaphysics. You have to have a view of life. What's it for? What's really meaningful? Then you can have political, social attempts at solutions to that. If you don't know what it's for, if your assumption is economic growth, more and more economic growth will lead to fulfillment, if that's the metaphysical basis, it's an infantile metaphysical basis, particularly when we know that we're running out of resources on this planet and you can't have continual economic growth. But that's the only, as it were, philosophical basis that all the parties are basing their lives on. Do you know what I mean? What a pathetic argument to say, will you be richer? That is what it boils down to. Will you be richer? I don't know. It's pathetic in this country. I'm not saying that wealth isn't important, but beyond a certain level of comfort and wealth, it's been proven that more wealth does not make you more fulfilled. Yeah? So let's get a little bit, let's think and reflect a bit more deeply. Anyway, Buddhism is saying, look, life is for something, and its values are something like, if you had to chunk it down to ordinary values, never mind enlightenment, never mind what's beyond death, it is something like a development of consciousness that sees the world with more kindness, with more beauty, with more connectedness than our atomized individualistic concern for me and my well-being. Yeah? Real fulfillment will come from something else. And meaning is intrinsic to consciousness. So when you really sort of think back to when you were young, some of you have to think back further than others. Think back to when you were young. If somebody had asked you, what do you want to do with your life, you will have had some sort of response that was bigger than probably later on you ended up doing. Do you know what I mean? We settle for less. I can remember thinking when I was young, I want to be fulfilled, I want to be happy. I didn't have the words fulfillment and stuff. I want to be happy. And I knew that there was more. Kids have that. Kids have a sense of magic. And at some point they grow out of that and a cynicism sets in. And partly that's a sort of hormonal phase of adolescence, but partly there's a disillusionment. a disillusionment. And don't settle for that. That's what I'm trying to say. No matter how old or young you are, you don't have to settle for that. So why... what Buddhism, I guess, says is, look, if fulfillment comes through the mind, if everything that you experience comes through the mind, and if the potential of the mind is vast, infinite actually, then it begins by taking responsibility for our mind. The path begins by taking responsibility for our mind. That means that whatever happens to us in life, and of course awful things happen to people in life, you can't control all the events that happen, but Buddhism says that you can always, at least in potential, be in charge of how you respond to the events of life. And you can respond either reactively or you can respond creatively. If you respond reactively, you go around the same habitual sort of cycle of greed and hatred, and you further the delusion. If you you have this sort of late night longing for you have this sort of gnawing, I don't know if you've had this, but like you want to go to bed because you're tired, and yet you kind of think, I'm not fulfilled. Do you have that? Do you have that sense of, actually, the day hasn't quite done it? I'm not really satisfied with my day. I don't want to go to bed with this sort of empty feeling inside. And what do? You go to the fridge. Yeah, you open the fridge and you look for fulfillment in the fridge. Or you make toast and you hope that will assuage this nagging existential feeling that you have had, that life today has not lived up to its potential. Yeah? A very, very kind of common thing. If we do that, it's just a sort of cheap distraction. There are worse things than the fridge and toast to distract yourself with, but you just keep putting off this gnawing dissatisfaction that there should be something else. And you decide you're not going to look at it. You kind of just put your head in the sand and say, okay, well, let's just forget about all of that and go to work. There's that way of responding. Or sometimes people just get angry and blame and become embittered. And it's somebody else's fault. And they feel a victim of their own life. Yeah? Neither of those is taking responsibility for our lives and our mind. A creative response is to start really looking at how does the mind work. One of the things meditation teaches you is not to just try and have pleasant experiences, but look at how does the mind actually work. How does experience itself arise? What is it to have an experience? Who am I in here having the experience? And what is it out there that I'm experiencing? What is the nature of consciousness? You look at all of that and you find, I don't know if you find answers, but you find like a new consciousness opening up, a new type of consciousness opening up that is much more fulfilled. Anyway, taking responsibility for one's mind is kind of Buddhism 101. Yeah? And after 30-something years of practice, I am embarrassed to say I can't always take responsibility for my own mind. Like, I live in a community, and on Thursday, there's 10 of us, some of you are here in the community, we were cleaning. We do an annual, not an annual clean. I've given the game away. We do a weekly clean, very thorough clean. Anyway, I was hoovering this week, and we've only got one hoover that works. I was hoovering, there was a lot to hoover, and somebody came from the community and said, oh, Jnanavaca, can we just take the hoover off you? Because we need to hoover something in one of the kitchen drawers. And I was like, no, no you can't. And he said, well, we do need to hoover the kitchen drawer. And I'm thinking, yeah, but I've got a dozen rooms to hoover. And so I grudgingly gave him the hoover and then came down with a sort of grudging expression. Anyway, the poor chap handed me the hoover back after a minute or two. And then I think they needed to hoover some other drawer. I don't know why you hoover drawers, but... I think he was too scared to come and ask me. And he sent somebody else. He sent Maitri Kumara, who works as a teacher, and said, now, Jnanavaca, I know you like your hoover. It's really good to share. It's really good to share. Anyway, it's embarrassing. That is just a tiny example. I could give you more serious examples, but let's just stick with the hoover example. It's not taking responsibility, it's getting locked into a narrowness. Do you know what I mean? A narrowness where I and my needs or wants are at the centre of everything. I'm the centre of everything. Yeah, the world revolves around me. It's like, you know, the Copernican revolution. People used to think that the sun revolved around the earth. And then Copernicus discovered that actually the sun is at the centre of our solar system and we revolve around the sun. That was a Copernican revolution. He got punished for it by the Catholic Church. But it's almost like we need a Copernican revolution of the mind. We, all of us, if we're not enlightened, think of ourselves at the centre of the universe. And it doesn't revolve around us. It really doesn't. And to the extent that we think we do, we suffer. So the path leading to freedom, there are lots of expressions of that path. One that is very simple, that I keep coming back to, the Buddha kept coming back to, is the threefold path. Do you know the threefold path? Did you study it in your course? Anybody from the course? Did they study it? Samantha Vajra didn't teach the threefold path. That's all right, because I can tell you now. It's ethics, meditation, wisdom. Sila, Samadhi, Prajna in Sanskrit. Sila, Samadhi, Prajna. You start with looking at how do I act in the world? Yeah? So am I acting from friendliness, kindness, sharing? Am I acting from kindness, generosity, contentment, truthfulness, and mindfulness? Or am I acting from self-centered motives? Yeah? You start with looking at your actions. They don't have to be perfect, but you do, if you want to progress along this path of conscious transformation, you can't avoid looking at your actions. That means looking at your relationships, by the way, because most of ethics is concerned with how I act with others. Yeah? So kindness, generosity, contentment, truthfulness and mindfulness, awareness. Awareness of the larger situation, not just me and my Hoover. That's essential as a foundation for practice. On top of that, then you meditate. So if you're living a thoroughly self-centered life where you're rude to people at work, ignore people on the street, are angry with your partner and your family, you're blaming, etc. Now, if that's the mode that you're living in, then frankly, meditation won't work. It won't go very deep. It'll stay very, very superficial. Yeah, you might have a good 1 or 2 meditations, but it won't have a transformative effect. So sooner or later, you have to start looking at your behavior, sila, ethics. Then, if you are trying to, I mean, for example, vegetarianism. If you're, I don't know, if you're not moving towards vegetarianism, or at least acknowledging that that's a better way of living, then what are you doing when you do the Metabhavana and in the 5th stage, sending loving kindness to all beings? Do you see the tension? And creating more tensions in life is not going to help. So somehow we have to align ourselves with our values. Ethics is a starting point, it's not the end point. And actually, you don't ever stop working on ethics. It's not like you do it, you're generous, and now you can move on. But the next phase is meditation. The next stage is meditation. And I'm not going to say much about that. Hopefully Jnanavaca did teach meditation. And everybody's familiar with it. With meditation, you're using the mind to work directly on the mind. With ethics, you're indirectly you're indirectly, your actions, you're purifying your actions because they have an effect on your own consciousness. So it's a sort of indirect way of working on the mind through our behaviour. With meditation, it's a direct way of working on the mind. And then prajna is wisdom, where you reflect on, I'll come back to wisdom, you reflect on the true nature of experience. And in a way, that's not, you don't need to know much philosophy, if any at all. What you do need to reflect on is that you do not know what's going on. If you could just, if out of these 3 weeks, you could be left with a bit less certainty that you know what's going on, then I would have felt happy. It's like we have such a strong belief that I know what's going on, I know what experience is, I know what life is. We don't question it. Buddhism gets you to question everything. It doesn't give you easy answers. It says question it and realize something miraculous for yourself. Not miraculous in the sense that it's supernatural, it's your own potential. Realize it for yourself and then see. Yeah. So it's a bit like you have to put in the work. If you want, if you want to learn physics, like I did a degree in physics, it takes about 20 years of learning the maths to understand quantum mechanics. And if you don't put in the work, then you have to take the physicists on trust. You can't say, no, I don't believe you. You have to take it on trust, or you put in the work. So similarly, when I say meditation can open doors in your mind that you have probably not even dreamt of, well, you don't have to believe me, but do the work. Yeah? If you flat out think, no, I'm wrong, well then how narrow-minded is that? Do the work. Go on a retreat and see for yourself, does meditation open those doors or not? Yeah. Anyway, the threefold path. In order to kind of, I think, practice the threefold path, we need a context. I don't think it's going to be possible for most of us to do that on our own. You may be exceptional. I think Bhante, my teacher, was exceptional. The Buddha, of course, was exceptional. But even Bhante had teachers who taught him. The Buddha discovered it for himself. But I think most of us will need a context. I think you will need a context like a community where others are helping you walk this path. Without that, I don't think for most of us it's going to be possible. It doesn't have to be this community. This community, this Triratna Buddhist order and community, is just one expression of how you can practice the Dharma. And you may find other presentations of the Dharma that somehow suit you more. Well then that's completely fine and good. But you will need some sort of context. That's what I'm trying to say. And YouTube isn't enough. You will probably need some sort of human interaction with people who are also practicing. Like if you're watching online and you're living in a place where there's no Sangha, well then you have to do the best you can. But even you will probably need to go on retreat with other people at least some of the time. So what I'm trying to say is meditating on your own, or even coming to classes here, isn't enough. It won't be enough. Ultimately, the context has to be our whole life, but we will need support for that. Okay, so that's the kind of context of this first verse, the Bardo of life. Life is for something, it's about consciousness, it's about growth in consciousness, and we will need both a path and a context for that. Also, the Bardo says, look, this verse, assumes that there's something special about the human form. Once that the human form has been attained, let there be no time or opportunity in which to idle it away. The body, this human body, gives you, it said, enough of an experience of change and enough of an experience of stability for you to work on your mind. If you didn't have any experience of change, if nothing changed in your body, if your hair never fell out or went grey, there wouldn't be much motivation. Like if the body was always youthful and lovely, I don't think you'd worry about death. And do you know what I mean? There wouldn't be much motivation. But guess what? The body does change. And if you're not yet, if you're too young to know that for in your own experience, just look around you. It will happen to you. Yeah, I'm looking at Patrick, who is the grand age of 22. Look around, Patrick, it will happen to you. So it gives you an experience of change, that's a motivator, but it also gives you enough stability to have something to ground your meditation experience in. Like in this room, I was saying, look, ground your meditation, your mind in your body, your awareness in your body, your belly and your heart center and your legs, and so on. It gives you some sort of stability. So, for example, to compare it with dreams. In a dream, you have a dream body. There will be a sense of having a body, but it's like a dream body. It's a different mode of consciousness. But in a dream, the dream body is so, as it were, fluid and unstable, and the whole dream experience is so, fluid, that there's not much stability for you to direct your will. You can't, unless you're trained in lucid dreaming, you can't direct the dream. Whereas in life, there is sufficient stability for you to use your will to say, yeah, I want to practice the Dharma and I want to work on my mind. Does that make sense? The other reason the human form is said to be so precious is that we've got something called self-consciousness, where we can become aware of our own minds. So I can look at my own thoughts and choose whether to take them seriously or to ignore them, to act on them or to ignore them. Most people who don't meditate don't really look at their own mind, and what happens is they act on their thoughts, they act on their impulses, and without very much pause. What meditation does is it creates a gap between the impulse and the thought, the impulse or the thought and the action. And in that gap, you can choose whether you want to act on that thought or not. Do you see what I mean? So you might have a thought of real anger, even a violent thought. Meditation will allow you to not sort of just act on that, but have more of a gap. It instills in you a sense of, awareness that allows you to take more responsibility. I'm not saying that people who don't meditate don't have some awareness. It's just that meditation increases that. Yeah? And we've got the capacity to have self-awareness, so we can deliberately choose to work on our own minds. Human beings are possibly unique in that. A giraffe, as I am fond of saying, probably doesn't, as it's sort of chewing its leaves, think, oh, I wonder if I'm living my best life today. It doesn't have that sort of self-inquiry capacity. It means it also isn't neurotic or prone to depression or anxiety in the way that we are. But self-consciousness is an evolutionary step forward. That's why it's a precious opportunity. Okay, so this verse says don't waste, basically what it's saying is don't waste this opportunity. It says there being no idleness in a devotee's life. Yeah? So it's saying let me not be idle. Let me not be idle with this life. You're telling yourself with these verses, let me not be idle with this life. Let me not be lazy. So I'm going to just look at a Buddhist analysis of laziness and see if we can recognize your favourite form of laziness in this analysis. The first form of laziness that is talked about is that technically it's called the pleasure of lying down and not getting up. That's the technical, the pleasure in Sanskrit, the pleasure of lying down and not getting up. Yeah. It's inertia, lazy inertia. It's my favourite form of laziness. It's what I specialise in. It also extends to procrastination. Who procrastinates here? Hooray! I'm not the only one. But that sort of procrastinating laziness, not getting on with things. You don't procrastinate, did you? Okay, very good. Anyway, that's the first form of laziness, Samantha Vajra. A second form, which I guess I've touched on already and may be related, is a sort of, it's a laziness where we make excuses for ourselves. It's a laziness where we blame others or blame life, and we don't take responsibility for our own minds, because we invent some sort of story where we're always the victim. We're always the victim of life, and it's somebody else's fault. It's really common on, I don't sort of look at social media very much, but look at the comments on social media, and people are always blaming other people or situations or politicians, or do you know what I mean? It's somebody else's fault. Well, Buddhism says that's a sort of laziness. It's laziness because you're not taking responsibility for your own mind and your own behaviour. In its extreme form, it turns into despair, a sense that you're powerless. There's nothing you can do. And that, of course, is toxic and can spiral into depression and so forth. More commonly, it's a sort of tendency to just let yourself off the hook all the time. You become the hero of your own narrative. You read every situation in the sense that you're in the right and the other person is in the wrong. And then a worse form of that, maybe it's a slightly different sort of form of laziness, is where you become cynical. It's very common in our culture to become cynical, and cynicism in our culture is even seen as cleverness. Nobody's going to get one over on me. I'm not going to just be hoodwinked into some sort of religious mumbo-jumbo, or whatever it is. We become hardened, hard-hearted, defended, and cynical. And Buddhism is saying that's not clever, that's just lazy. Yeah? It's childish and lazy. Anyway, so that's another whole sort of area of laziness. I haven't got time to explore it more. And the third form of laziness that I want to talk about is being really busy. So it's the opposite of lying down and not getting up. It's where you're really busy. Gampopa, the Tibetan master, disciple of Milarepa, so you're looking at, I think it's sort of 12th century Tibet, he said, laziness of this sort was destroying your enemies, accumulating wealth, and so forth. So what he means is just getting what you can in life, grabbing, getting, destroying your enemies, getting ahead in the career, on the career ladder, buying the bigger house, getting what you want. Pursuing those material goods as ends in themselves is a form of laziness, and you can be really busy doing it. You can be really busy doing it, and you can turn it into a sort of virtue in your mind. Look how hard I work. If you're not developing your own mind, Buddhism says you're being lazy. It doesn't matter if you're making your millions or even trying to save the world in some sort of altruistic way. If you're not also at the same time working on your mind, you're being lazy. So that's a sort of busy inertia. So do you recognise those? Do you recognise one of those or more than one of those? Yeah, good. Not good, but good. So let me just turn to the verse again and see if we can just pick out. That's about idleness, but let's pick out something else. Entering into the reality undistractedly, listening, reflecting, and meditating. Listening, reflected, and meditating. Entering into the reality undistractedly. So the reality here in this translation has a capital R. Buddhism doesn't use that word very much. It doesn't sort of have. But what it is saying is that there's something more. Entering into that mystery, you could call it, undistractedly, clear-sightedly, in this life, not waiting till you die. Not waiting till you die. The mystery will arrive when you die. Somebody once asked my teacher Bante, what happens when we die? And he just looked at them and said, "You will soon find out." That wasn't the answer that they were looking for. I'm reminded of Steve Jobs. Do you know when he died, the founder of Apple, so one of the most wealthy, influential, successful men in that worldly sense, apparently he was surrounded by family, friends and family, on his deathbed. And he opened his eyes, and you can look this up, but I don't think it's made up. He opened his eyes and he said, "Wow, oh wow, wow," and then died. Yeah. And I think he saw something of what I'm going to talk about next week. The Bardo of the moment of death. Yeah. But you know, the point with this Bardo of life is that you don't have to wait till the moment of death before you open up to the wonder of consciousness, of the mind. Yeah. So that's entering into the reality undistractedly. Then it says listening, reflecting, meditating. Now that's a traditional list. It's known as the 3 levels of wisdom. Normally they're seen in a sort of sequential order, hierarchical order. So you begin with listening to the Dharma, listening to what the Buddha had to say about the teaching, his teaching. That includes these days reading, but you hear the teaching, and you try and hear it sort of without the cynicism, for example. You hear it with a clear, open mind and an open heart. The quality of your mind when you hear something is going to be key as to whether you understand it or not. Listening, reflecting, meditating begins with just an open-hearted, open-minded, okay, well, tell me what you think, what the teaching is. You don't have to accept it, but you listen. Reflecting is the next level of wisdom, where you then do, having listened and heard and understood, you question it. You can question it, test it. Does it ring true? Does it ring true in your own experience or not? And the Buddha said, test his own words like a goldsmith would test gold. I have no idea how you test gold, but you don't have to accept the purity of the gold, presumably. You test it in the fire. You test in the fire of your own experience. Does it ring true? Does it work? You can only do that, by the way, if you practice it. Like, you can't test if meditation works unless you meditate. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, you test it. You reflect on it. You see if it makes sense to you at a deeper level. That's the second level of wisdom. You sort of make it your own. You embody it. And the third level of wisdom is that you meditate upon it, and in this heightened state of consciousness, or as best you can manage, you see if that you can sort of get underneath the words to where the words are pointing to a direct experience. So you've got these 3 levels of wisdom: listening, reflecting, meditating. They're normally, as I say, sort of presented in that sequence of hierarchy, but actually sometimes people, just by listening to the Dharma, hearing the Dharma, gain a realization of the Dharma. Bhante became a Buddhist. Well, I say he became a Buddhist. He realized that he was a Buddhist and always had been a Buddhist at the age of 16 when he first read the Diamond Sutra. The Diamond Sutra is a text which is unfathomable from a rational perspective. It's there to confound logic. And he read it and knew, he had a direct experience of the truth of the Diamond Sutra. He says that it was as if he had always known that truth, and he had only, as it were, reawoken to it. He knew that he was a Buddhist. He had a direct experience of it, of the truth of the Diamond Sutra. These verses, and in fact the whole of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Tadol, the practice is that as somebody is dying, you read them the Book of the Dead, and they hear it. Apparently hearing is one of the last senses to go when you die. So you sit with the dying person and even with the corpse, and you read the Bardo Tadol to them. And you do it over several days. So last year I was on a retreat where we read the whole text aloud over a period of about 9 days or something. And I was one of the readers, and day after day you've got these teachings of the Bardo. It has quite an effect. It has quite an effect if you just hear it. So listening, reflecting, meditating. Carrying on to the path, knowledge of the true nature of appearances of mind and of mind. So I'm not going to say much about that. I've said something about it last week, where I was saying that Buddhism says, look, we live in a world of appearances. It's not saying that those appearances are completely unreal. Hinduism does, by the way. Hinduism has this sense that this world is illusory, I mean completely unreal. That there is a deeper reality, but it's beyond this world of sense perception. Buddhism says this world of sense experience, including this body, is not absolutely real, but it does appear. It's like an appearance, like a dream. A dream isn't absolutely real, but it does appear, it does happen. You don't deny that you've had a dream, but when you wake up, you realise that it's less real than your waking experience. Well, Buddhism's saying your waking experience is actually less real than enlightened consciousness or enlightened experience. But it is relatively real. Why is that so important? Why is anybody know why that's so important? Why is it important that this world of appearances isn't completely unreal? Yes, Liam.
It wasn't. There's no reality to it. Then how can you take responsibility for it?
Yeah, that's right. If there's no reality, if this is absolutely unreal, then how can you take responsibility for anything that you do? What some people end up some people end up going is that if this world is completely unreal, nothing matters. However I act, it doesn't matter. And Hinduism can veer towards that. It can mean that you can be unskillful, unkind, like the caste system is incredibly cruel to millions of people. But from a Hindu perspective, that doesn't matter because this world isn't really real at all. Yeah, and there's a deeper reality, and so it doesn't matter if I kill somebody in this life because it's all illusion. Buddhism's saying, look, that's very, very wrong. This world is relatively real. It's not as real as we think it is, but how we act will shape our life. The law of karma in Buddhism says how I act will shape my life. It's like this relatively real world is co-created. It's not completely objective, it's not completely subjective. We create it with our minds and with our actions. yet it's relatively real. So ethics is so important. You can't dismiss ethics. How I act is really important, and you don't take it for absolute reality. You see that actually this world is somehow dreamlike, and that there's a deeper reality that somehow shines through sometimes. So taking onto the path knowledge of the true nature of appearances and of mind. There's much that could be said about that. I said more last week. I could give a whole series of talks on the true nature of appearances and of mind. But for now, let's move on. May the trikaya be realised. So, Jnanavaca, do you want to say what that means? No, I'm picking on you, sorry, it's my talk. May the trikaya is another way, I guess, of talking about enlightenment, but it's quite a complicated concept. It's quite a complicated concept about talking about the Buddha's body and the Buddha's mind, and I'm not going to go into it. So it's like, may Buddhahood be realised. May Buddhahood be realised. So carrying on to the path, knowledge of the true nature of appearances and of mind, may the trikaya be realised. Once that the human form has been attained, may there be no time or opportunity in which to idle it away. So again, we're back to laziness. So Buddhism is saying, get on with it. This life is precious. Don't wait till you come to die and then have regrets. This verse, all 6 verses, finish with this exhortation. No, maybe I'll come back to that and end with that. I want to come back to what Bhante has, a sort of evolutionary model of what the universe is, what is going on. I touched on this last week, and I find it very inspiring. So I'm going to come back to it now. He's saying that this growth in consciousness that I'm talking about isn't just a personal affair. It's not just a personal affair. It's as if the whole cosmos, this phenomenal world, which is only relatively real, it's as if it's manifesting itself at ever higher degrees of consciousness. It's like there's a trajectory of more and more consciousness manifesting in this universe. So in a rock, Buddhism says a rock is not inanimate, because nothing is. It's like even the fundamental particles that make up the rock are somehow a manifestation of consciousness. But it's a very, very low-level manifestation of consciousness. And then you've got plant life, and then animal life, and then this human self-consciousness, and that isn't the end point. Buddhism's saying it's as if, and it's an as if, it's a poetic kind of vision of the universe, the cosmos, wanting to manifest consciousness that ultimately realizes what the universe is. It's like the universe wants to know itself in form. And in a Buddha, an enlightened being, it's said that the universe, as it were, knew itself, reality knew itself in a human form, in a human body. And that's not the end of the goal either, because then the goal is it's about, say you become enlightened on the women's or men's intensive. If you become enlightened while you've still got a human body, you then become a vehicle for that enlightened consciousness to come through you in this relatively real, but not absolutely real, phenomenal world. And how that force of enlightenment manifests through you is as a force of compassion. It's like you become a vehicle for a transcendental force of compassion that isn't personal. It's like you have got out of the way. There is no more individual consciousness sort of left. You've seen through that. There's a new type of consciousness that doesn't have a dualistic perspective of me and world. And that comes through you, through your physical body, which is still in this phenomenal world, as a force of compassion. As a force of energy and compassion. Padmasambhava, who is said to have given this teaching of the Bardo Tadol, is like an image, he's sitting on the shrine there, of that force of wisdom and compassion coming through in human form. The Buddha is as well, but Padmasambhava is particularly associated with this text. That's why we've got him on the shrine. And that is not the end either, because an enlightened being would naturally then try to create on earth, in this phenomenal world that isn't absolutely real but not completely unreal, they'd try to create a pure land where all inhabitants were free, were enlightened. So they would try and create a community that would spread bigger and bigger until all beings were free. That's the Buddhist vision. That's the Buddhist vision. It's not about individual personal enlightenment, incredible though that might be in itself. It's about then can we become a force for good in the world. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say that unless human beings learn to transcend self-centered consciousness, unless we really do open up to a new level of consciousness as a species, we won't survive. We will not survive. I don't think I'm being hyperbolic in saying that. Nor do I want to panic people. I'm not trying to panic you. All I'm saying is that the mess that we've got into, that we are continually in, won't be answered on its own level by socio-political solutions or technological solutions or whatever. It is going to take those, I'm not denying that, but it's going to take a new level of consciousness. Does that make sense? A new level of consciousness. So this project of trying to work on your own mind and then, well, maybe at the same time, helping others and to work on their mind and creating a community of human beings who are trying to evolve their consciousness to another level, that project is, I think, the most important project that anybody can be engaged in. And when you compare that to how most people live their lives and their projects, their sort of more worldly projects, it puts it into context as to what life is for. Does that make sense? That I think Bhante, Sangharakshita, his project, his vision, was to raise the level of consciousness of human beings. And his way of doing that was to create a Buddhist order and a Buddhist movement. This centre is just one tiny part of now an international community. We are very, very young. We're like less than 60 years old. We're very, very young. And fortunately, there are many other people, Buddhist and non-Buddhist, engaged in this project to raise human consciousness. But that is the project. It's not what the politicians tell you. It doesn't matter who gets in at the next general election. It won't really matter in terms of this project. I mean, do vote. I'm not saying don't vote. But it doesn't really matter. Does that make sense? And if this project matters, if I've managed to even make you think that it matters for a minute, well then look at your life. Look at what you're doing. What are you prioritizing? And be honest with yourself. Are you being idle? Are you subject to one of those forms of laziness? And with that, I will finish with the very last words of the root verses, which is an exhortation which I find exhilarating and terrifying. O procrastinating one, who thinks not of the coming of death, devoting yourself to the useless doings of this life, improvident are you in dissipating your great opportunity. Mistaken indeed will your purpose be now, if you return empty-handed from this life. Since the holy Dharma is known to be your true need, will you not devote yourself to the holy Dharma even now? Thanks so much. Thank you.